Welcome to the Big Séance podcast. I'm Patrick Keller of BigSeance.com, and this is a place for an open discussion on all things paranormal, but specifically topics like ghosts and hauntings, paranormal research, spirit communication, psychics and mediums, and life after death. So basically, anything that pops up in my paranormal world. The candles are already lit, so you might as well come on in and join the Séance. Hey there, you're back. Thanks for joining me again here at the Big Séance table. You know, if you follow me on social media, or maybe you've been keeping up with my nerdiness on the blog, I may have mentioned that I would cover what ended up being my third annual Thanksgiving Ouija seance. I think I said that this episode would likely be about that seance from a few weeks back. It turns out that once again, we didn't get any communication from the board itself, making it probably a 3-year stretch, I'm guessing, of having nothing but silence coming from the board in all of my sessions. But we often at least have some kind of activity, whether it be spirit rapping or knocking, like our very exciting Halloween seance from just a month or so ago. Or we'll sometimes get some kind of EVP or communication through the spirit box. But this session seemed to be pretty uneventful. Oh, there are always those questionable responses that drive me nuts because I'll never know when my brain goes back and forth. But even after I analyzed the audio, I didn't feel as if I could really make an exciting episode out of the evening's session. So who knows? I might bring it up at some point, but I decided our time would be better served by talking to our guest for today. I have with me Ginger Collins-Justus, who is the owner and operator of Missouri History and Hauntings. Ginger reached out to me a few months ago, and we began talking, and our conversation went a little something like this. How in the world have two nerds like us lived in the same general part of the state, and we've never bumped into each other? That's really kind of how it went. And sure enough, not long after we started talking, we finally bumped into each other at, well, a very nerdy kind of event, the death and mourning event. What other kind of event would we bump into each other at? At the, now, Ginger, you might have to help me, the Châtillon de Menil mansion. Say that for me.
You know, I don't think I've ever pronounced the first word out loud before. I always just call it the Demenel Mansion.
Okay, well, maybe I'll just do the same thing.
No one has ever corrected me, so I'm hoping I'm saying that right.
Maybe no one knows, but this mansion is in St. Louis, and it's actually right next door to the famous Lemp Mansion. I wrote a blog post and shared some pictures on BigSeance.com of the event back in October. Anyway, Ginger was working there that day as the arsenic expert, so maybe she can talk to you about that a little later if she wants. But the funny thing is, I knew that Ginger was going to be inside because her famous hearse was parked right outside the building, and that hearse can only mean one thing: Ginger Collins-Justus is around somewhere. So she'll definitely have to talk a bit about that as well. So we got to chat in person finally, and now I'm excited to have her on the podcast today to tell us all about Missouri History and Hauntings, a state I know well, but I'm sure she knows a lot of things that I don't. Hello, Ginger. Welcome to the Big Séance podcast.
Hi. Thank you so much for having me on.
You're welcome. So tell us about, tell us about your site and some of the, exciting things that you have going on.
Well, Missouri History and Hauntings was founded in 2007, and it kind of started as a paranormal group, a group of ghost hunters, and we would go to haunted locations and try to document paranormal activity. And then that kind of faded away and morphed into what it is today, which is a culmination of my obsession with Missouri history and ghosts.
Mm-hmm.
And most of the things that I dig into are pre-1920, anything from, just day-to-day odd living in that time period to what I call our morbid Missouri history, which covers more of like the gruesome accidents and murders and things of that nature that happened pretty regularly in this state and that not a lot of people know about.
And you did something recently at the Milton Schoolhouse in Alton, Illinois, which is such a cool place. And I've only been there once, and it was before they turned it into the cool place it is now. What did you have going on there just recently?
Well, the old Milton Schoolhouse was purchased by a lovely couple. I'm not sure how long exactly they've had ownership of it, but they have done some amazing remodeling and turned it into a business incubator of sorts. They give a helping hand to small businesses starting out. And one of their own businesses that they just opened in the last 6 months, I believe, is called Maevas. And it's a coffee shop. And it's absolutely darling. And it has this real gypsy vibe to it. And one of the owners, Meredith, she decided to put together this holiday bazaar that had kind of a gypsy theme to it. And so she invited 10 vendors to set up in the hallway in the schoolhouse outside of the coffee shop. And they ranged from a woman who makes aprons, kind of kitschy aprons and trinkets and whatnot, to there was a vendor there who had animal skulls and things that he has made out of animal skulls, which was really cool. And of course I was there. I was selling my witchy items, which is also something that I'm very passionate about aside from Missouri history, is that I am very spiritual. And so I had, pendulums, I had incense and bath salts and spell candles and tarot cards and things like that. And I was also doing spirit guide readings as well. So it was really fun. I hope Meredith decides to do it again soon. And they had a great crowd. As a matter of fact, it was Friday and Saturday this past weekend. But I was only there Friday because I completely sold out of everything I brought Friday night. And so I thought, well, I don't really have anything else to bring for Saturday. So, I'll just be sitting there in the back. And so, yeah, it was wonderful. Great crowd. Beautiful place.
I think it's funny that the first question I asked you was a place about Illinois, not even Missouri.
That is funny.
But I had to bring it up because I love the Milton Schoolhouse. My to the listeners who maybe aren't sure, or maybe they do remember, if you're a fan of Ghost Hunters, I think it's really one of my favorite episodes was at the Milton Schoolhouse. It's an old elementary school, and there was a supposed murder but really creepy looking place, at least the way it was before, this new couple took over. But I saw pictures of that kind of that coffee house, right?
Mm-hmm, yeah.
It's so cool looking.
It is. It's absolutely gorgeous. And their coffee is amazing. And they have house baked goods and quiche. They have special quiches that they put out every day, just like single serve size quiche. And it's amazing. They have a lot of odds and ends oddities that you can purchase there in the coffee shop as well that they sell for local vendors. And it's just a really cool vibe, and it's absolutely gorgeous. And outside in the hallway, she has set up a free library. So there are bean bags and chairs, and she has shelves of books that you can take and bring back, or bring your her own books and leave there for other people to read. And it's all totally free. It's on the honor system, you know. And she also has a computer there in the hallway for people to use as well. So it's a really neat place to hang out. I wish it was in Missouri.
Well, it's close enough. We can kind of pretend.
Right.
we can claim it.
Absolutely.
So you mentioned your spirit guide reading. So tell, like, how would you describe your gifts that you have in that area?
Well, I always tell people when they ask me what I do that I'm a history nerd who talks to dead people. Starting when I was about 9 years old, I began interacting with spirit energy of people who have passed over. And it's just kind of escalated and grown throughout the time since then. And now what I do is I can see, hear, interact, communicate with the spirits of those who have passed, as well as our spirit guides, the higher up energies on the other side that we kind of make a contract with to help us out here on the physical plane. And I'm able to sit with people and contact their guides to offer assistance or answer questions that they may have. Yeah, it's pretty amazing. I don't exactly know how it works or why I'm able to do this, but it happens, and I've helped a lot of people, and it's an amazing gift.
That is so very cool. I have read books on the topic, and I've taken, courses on the topic and have tried, and I just don't think I'm meant to consciously chill out with my spirit guide, because it doesn't ever happen for me. But I love reading about it and hearing about people's experiences with that.
It's interesting for sure. It's a totally different experience talking to spirit guides, or I know some people call them guardian angels, or we all have our own term for it, but it's a completely different experience talking to a spirit guide as opposed to just like somebody's dead grandma. Mm-hmm. Because they come through differently. It's a much stronger energy. I received the information in a different way. And it's a test for me, for the most part, because I have to interpret a lot of metaphors in their communication. So it's fun. And it's insightful, and sometimes, I take away important lessons from just passing along someone else's information, from their own guides. So, yeah, it's pretty amazing.
And it has to be very helpful in some of the adventures you like to go out on.
It is. Yes, I put myself in the most bizarre places and situations on purpose on a regular basis,
like hearses and
right, exactly. Yes, when I look like the girl next door. I have had workers come to my house to do gutter work or haul things away or whatever, and they come and they see the hearse sitting in the driveway, and they knock on the door, probably expecting the worst, right? And I open the door, and I look like, Little House on the Prairie, and they're like, I actually had a guy say to me once that came here, he said, "Whoa, I did not expect you to look this way," and I'm like, "Oh, well, that's okay. I'm not really sure how to take that," but he's like, "No, I don't mean that in the wrong way. I was just expecting somebody, dressed completely in black and, wearing like black nail polish and looking all goth." And I am the polar opposite of that. So yeah, it's interesting when I meet people. I tell them that I drive a hearse, and they're really taken aback.
Oh, I think it is so cool and hip and right up my alley. That's really cool.
It's fun. It's definitely, if you want a vehicle that gets lots of attention, I say save your $60,000 that you would spend on a sports car and buy a hearse. Yeah, I have people honk and wave. I have people that, you know, are like rubbernecking when they pass me. Yeah, it's, my friends, of course, are like, I saw a hearse driving down the highway and I knew it was you. I'm like, oh, great. You know, everyone knows where I'm at. So.
Well, I told you to be ready to chat about some of your favorite Missouri hauntings and stories of different kinds. So what do you have for us? Would you like to talk to us about tonight?
Oh, well, let's see. I've got quite a spectrum of stories. Some of my favorites are Missouri's history with witchcraft and voodoo. Which is not something that a lot of people, like when you talk about Missouri, that's usually not one of the first things that pop into people's mind is that, you know, our state's full of old witches and voodoo practitioners. But it was very prominent, especially in southern Missouri. A lot of mountain witches, I call them, just, you know, living in the hills and off the land. And they had these amazing gifts that they were either praised for or shunned for. And in one case with a man in Lynn County, Missouri, I've got a newspaper article from 1877 that says, you know, he was a voodoo practitioner, according to the superstitious belief of his neighbors. And there was an entire family that died in 1 week, and they accused him of killing them by using witchcraft.
Wow.
And so a mob took him out of his cabin at night, and they hanged him. And they buried his body 20 feet deep under huge stones. And the newspaper says that this was done to prevent his getting out and harming his murderers.
I'd hate for him to crawl up above the stones.
Right. Isn't that... It seems really, I can't imagine, I consider myself a witch for the most part. I don't have a cauldron, and I don't have scraggly gray hair, but I do commune with nature, and of course I talk to dead people, and that's enough back in the 1800s for anyone to call me a witch. So I can imagine my neighbors gathering in my front yard and dragging me out in the middle of the night, and not only lynching me, but burying me 20 feet in the ground because they were so afraid of what I would do after my death.
And this was 100 or 200 years after the witch trials, right? So you'd think they'd know better by
right.
then.
Yeah, well, it was not something that it may have not been as prominent in the public eye as it was during the Salem witch trials, but Missouri definitely had her fair share of witches and people who lived here who were condemned by death by neighbors who were terrified of their superstitious beliefs. Mm-hmm. And there was a woman who, a little closer to home, there was a woman in St. Charles County who her name was Molly Crenshaw. And she is said to have been a voodoo practitioner in St. Louis County. And locals requested her assistance. They would go to her for spells and potions, which were probably, in today's standards, homeopathic medicine.
Yeah.
Using herbs, using nature to, cure what ails us. Mm-hmm. There was a cold winter, a very, very cold winter when the farmers lost a lot of crops. It was very damaging. She was cursed by the townspeople. She was the neighborhood witch, and they thought it was all her fault. People who praised her good deeds suddenly shunned her and cursed her, and they surrounded her home in true witch hunt fashion and dragged her out of her home, where she was then drawn and quartered.
Oh my gosh. And what time period would this have been?
I believe this was it was the late 1800s is when it would have been. Early 19th century, mid 19th century. Mm-hmm. So they dragged this poor woman who had helped many of them. The same people who dragged her out of her home were the people that she had been helping.
Mm-hmm.
She had been providing medicine for them. And legend says that she was screaming curses at them, you know, all the people who were touching her or were taking part in the madness. She was screaming curses at them. So after they had chopped her up into bits, they took the bits and separated them and buried them through the St. Charles woods, scattered them throughout the woods. And here's where it gets really weird. Legend says, over the last 100 years, the dismembered parts of Molly's body have been slowly moving. They've been crawling toward each other to finally form a corpse and return to the living to fulfill the curses that she placed on these people long ago.
This all reminds me of Hocus Pocus.
Right? You can't help but picture like the cliche witch in your mind when you're thinking of this. I mean, it really does sound like something from, you know, Salem back, you know, in the 1700s. This happened right here in Missouri. This happened not even 40 minutes from my house. You know, that's a little unsettling. And so it has been said by teenagers who have gone out in the 50s searching for, in the 1950s, you know, this was a big legend. And these teenagers would go out and they would search for her body. And it's said that anyone searching for her remains would suffer a horrible fate if they came close to her body. And in the 50s, there were two boys that were said to have located her headstone, which seems strange. For one, why would she have a headstone? I'm not really sure, but legends don't always make total sense. So anyway, so these boys were said to have found a headstone and they tried to steal it. And later, the boys' bodies were found impaled on a nearby iron fence.
Wow.
You know, they got too close to Molly Crenshaw's remains, apparently, because, you know, they suffered this horrible fate that the legend describes. And of course, you know, a la Bloody Mary says that if you chant things like, "I don't believe in you, Molly," that the witch makes herself known by disabling vehicles and giving visitors a sense of unease.
Of course.
So if you don't like feeling uneasy, then I would not recommend going to the St. Charles Woods and chanting, you know, about Molly Crenshaw.
I guess so. You know, I have always, listeners know this, I have always talked about how I would love to go back to Victorian times. I've always wanted to go in a time machine and spend at least a week in, you know, like the spiritualism movement or on a big house straight out of Meet Me in St. Louis. And, but then I hear your stories and I'm like, maybe not so much.
You know, it's funny because I have always felt the same way. I was so born in the wrong time period. Like I just don't fit in with all of this. Well, like our discussion about technology earlier, you know, I'm like, okay, I can usually figure it out, but it's very stressful when I'm in the process of doing that. And I think, gosh, you know, back 100 years ago, I would have been golden. Like I would have wanted to dress in the big dresses, all the layers and fancy clothes, and yeah, that totally, I would have loved that. I would dress like that every day if I could get by with it, but you know, my neighbors already think I'm crazy, so I try to keep my clothing somewhat normal. But yeah, I feel the same way. I feel like I missed the boat, or I don't know, I was born too late. But even reading stories like this, and I have to remind myself, and I'm reminded really by these stories every day because for my Facebook page, Missouri History and Hauntings, every day I dig up some bizarre story from the old Missouri newspaper archive, pre-1920. And I never fail to find just something really off the wall that takes me back. And it's like, wow, I have to remind myself this stuff really happened. These people really faced some awful times. Just going out of your house every day was like, God, am I going to come home at night? You know, I mean, people getting hit by trains and run over by, you know, runaway horses would go flying down the street. And if you walked out at the wrong time, walked out of the, you know, general store at the wrong time, you were a goner, or you at least had a lot of broken bones. It was just a lot of dangerous stuff happening back then, but it was definitely not the sweet little communities, Missouri country folk being nice to each other that people today like to think.
Yeah, we were talking before we actually started recording about the and you clearly are going to know more about it than me, but the island out on the Mississippi where people would go if they had some kind of argument or something to settle. What'd you say they called it? Bloody Island or
Bloody Island?
Bloody Island.
Yeah, it was the site of many duels. It was a very gentlemanly thing to do. If you had a problem with someone, you set up a duel with them. And if the man you were wanting to duel with was any sort of gentleman, he would take you up on it. And you would both get in a boat and go out to the island in the middle of the Mississippi River, where there were no laws. It was neither Missouri nor Illinois jurisdiction. Hence the reason they went out there and shot each other. And so these men would go out and they would each take a friend, usually their best friend, because if one man couldn't go through with the duel for whatever reason, then his second, they called it, would step up to take his place. And that's a best friend. Like, I don't know that I've ever had a best friend like that. Like, hey, I'm gonna go and maybe get shot by this person, and could you come with me? And if I decide to back out, then you take my place. Like, who does that? Who's like, yeah, I'll definitely go with you. I'm your best friend. Why
wouldn't I? Yeah, of course.
No, thank you. No. And it was a really big deal, and a lot of men lost their lives or were gravely injured on that island before it was finally, who was it that had it? It was causing traffic issues on the river, and so they...
Of course, not because of all the deaths, but...
No,
traffic.
not at all. We need the river to flow better. And so the Corps of Engineers were brought in to, kind of change things up, and Bloody River. Well, I guess it was Bloody River, really.
I guess it was, yeah.
Bloody Island on the Mississippi River was no more.
Wasn't there and I'm going to forget her name, but a woman in St. Louis about the height of spiritualism movement who used a Ouija board and channeled entire books through the Ouija board? Do you remember this woman?
That would be Patience Worth.
That's right.
Her name, the woman's name, the living woman, I should say, was Pearl Curran.
That's right, yeah.
And she was actually lived in Jefferson County for a while. Mm-hmm. And she began channeling a woman's spirit called Patience Worth. And of course, I don't have anything in front of me, date-wise, but it's a fascinating story.
It is, yeah.
It's amazing, because she wrote books and books and books, and her husband helped her a lot with that. He would have the books published and things like that. And it went on for quite a while, and she wrote poetry, and it was really fascinating.
And I remember reading that they said her actual education level did not, match up with the academic writing that she was channeling for these books, which is fascinating.
Exactly. Yeah. The level of poetry and book writing that she was doing definitely did not match up with her education level. Absolutely. And which, is why a lot of people took her seriously, because it was so bizarre. And of course, along those lines would be the Fox sisters.
Oh, yeah.
Actually, their connection to Missouri is they came to St. Louis and did a performance, I guess you could say.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a really strange doctor that St. Louis is fairly known for because he founded McDowell College. Mm-hmm. His name was Dr. Joseph McDowell. And McDowell College was used as a prison during the Civil War. And so anyway, he had McDowell College, and this guy was a real eccentric man, to put it nicely.
Mm-hmm.
He was a resurrectionist, for one. He would have his men dig up bodies and bring them to the school to use as cadavers. And but in 1859, the Fox sisters came to St. Louis, and they would do knocking. That was their thing, that they would do spirit knocking, table tipping, and things like that. And so the Fox sisters came to St. Louis, and Dr. McDowell went to them, and he said, look, come to my school. I want to do some experiments, some scientific experiments to prove whether or not you are the real deal. And so the girls went with him, and he put them through all of these tests, and he confirmed that they were not a hoax, that they were not charlatans, they were the real deal. And of course it was, I don't know how many years later that one of the Fox sisters came out and said, oh no, we're complete frauds.
Right.
We can, make popping noises with our toes and joints and whatnot. And so, but I love that story just, because here's this scientific man, this man who started his own college testing these spiritualists.
Well, those poor girls, they were tested every city they went to. Everybody wanted to test them.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But I had no clue of their Missouri connection. I never even thought about the possibility that they would have come through Missouri. Do you know where exactly they, what, was it a theater or something? Do we know?
I'm not sure. I would assume it was a theater. It was in St. Louis.
Yeah.
So I would assume it was a theater of some sort, but I'm not exactly sure of the location. St. Louis was really big into the spiritualist movement. I mean, it really was a big deal here. I've done so much research just because I am of course fascinated with the subject. Being in this area, I just want to know everything I can about it. And there were newspapers printed, radical newspapers for spiritualists. There were shops, bookstores, spiritualist bookstores, committees, associations. There was a spiritualist association founded in St. Louis in 1882, and they would have their meetings at the Mercantile Library.
Wow.
Yeah. And so it was a really, really big deal in St. Louis from the of course, Civil War era. Mm-hmm. Around that time would have been when it was really big around here. Different organizations, and of course people shunning people for being involved in spiritualism. I was reading a story about a man who was he was expelled from his church in 1853, and he had consulted mediums, and I guess his congregation that he was a part of in this Baptist church found out that he was consulting mediums, and they expelled him from the church and tried him for heresy.
Can't have that.
Right? You can't, oh, man.
But at least he wasn't chopped up into pieces.
Right. He was not drawn and quartered, at least that I know of. Now, going through the old newspapers every day, of course, I'll just read pages and pages, just skim through to see if anything interesting pops out. And the early 1900s was when it's about the time period I see a lot of the newspaper ads for clairvoyance and mediums in the newspapers in St. Louis. There was one paper, actually I even wrote it down because I'm like, that seems like an excessive number of ads. There were 18 ads in the classifieds in this St. Louis newspaper in just one issue of the newspaper in 1904.
Wow.
18 ads for clairvoyance in St. Louis.
And
just in St. Louis.
These would have been, they would have done this in their own homes?
For the most part,
Yeah.
I think there were some that were bigger in the business than others. Some just had their parlors in their homes set up to take guests, clients, I guess. And then some actually had small storefronts downtown where they would have people come in to talk to the dead.
It seems like an amazing collection you have. These are papers that you have?
They are not papers that I have hard copies of. They are papers that I have digitally accessed.
That's cool.
Yeah, that's one thing that I truly, truly love and admire about this state is they are really hardcore about their archives. Missouri is so passionate about protecting their history. And you can go on to the Missouri Secretary of State website, and they have actual PDF files of death certificates, which is an amazing thing to have as a genealogist, as a history nerd, as someone obsessed with like tracking down the people who used to call this place home. Being able to go online and search their name and actually pull up an image of their death certificate from like 1910 is just phenomenal.
Yeah.
It's such an amazing source to have. And if it's before 1910, they still have records online, but they're not the actual images. So it's pretty phenomenal, really, to think about it. All of this information you can get off a death certificate from going back to 1910. I think online it's like 1910 to 1964 right now. And you can search for anyone in Missouri that died in Missouri. They have to have died in Missouri. And you can search their name, and for the most part it'll pull up their death certificate, and you can get all sorts of information about them. Sorry, I'm getting all history nerdy now. I went from spiritualism to, oh my gosh, I'm a genealogist. I love tracking down dead people.
That's okay. We can nerd out any direction we want to go.
Good.
It is welcome here.
Awesome.
So you have any other stories for us?
I do have a great ghost story that has a lot of twists and turns that I think you'll enjoy. It's from 1898, and this took place in Independence, Missouri. And the newspaper article that I found is titled "Haunted by a First Love." Well, that really pulls you in, And so there's this lovely woman, Miss Leona Corder of Independence, and she fell in love with this young man named Jesse Wall. And they, courted and fell in love, and he proposed to her, and they were engaged, but her parents would not consent to the marriage. And that is because Wall was Corder's first cousin. But they were in love. And after Jesse Wall learned that her parents were not going to give their blessing for the wedding to occur, of course, he shot himself. And he left all of his property to his sweetheart. For months, her family thought that she was going to follow in his footsteps, and she was just absolutely heartbroken. Well, the parents had this other man, this very wealthy young man of Lafayette County. He was connected to one of the oldest families in that area, and he also loved Miss Corder and began courting her, and he proposed. And her parents said, "You're going to say yes. We're not giving you a choice here. This is the person you need to marry. You're not marrying your first cousin. You're marrying this very wealthy young man from a really good family." And the wedding was set. They set up the wedding in their house, and guests and relatives show up. And as the time of the ceremony got closer, she got more and more upset and said, she didn't love him. She would never love him. She did not want to marry him. Completely broke down, went to her room. The wedding supper was served while she's in her room having a breakdown. Then after the wedding supper, the marriage ceremony moved into her room, where her and Mr. Webb were finally married, and of course she was unhappy. He was unhappy. He had a house prepared for her. She refused to go.
It's a little dysfunctional.
Right, exactly. And she was, she was haunted by this first cousin. That's who she wanted to be with. That's who she wanted to marry. Now, the first cousin, he, of course, committed suicide, brought by train to Warrensburg and buried, left her a tragic letter, of course, premeditated. And she was, I don't know whatever happened to her, though. The newspaper doesn't say if they lived happily ever after or not. So I don't know if she stayed with the guy. But she was apparently haunted by the man that she had intended to marry. Haunted by his, spirit, of course.
A very long to be continued.
Right, exactly. And this is the type of stuff that I find that sends me on a wild goose chase for hours, going through records, scanning newspapers, trying to find out more about these people. It's an obsession.
Well, and what are the chances of somebody having the next chapter of their life covered in another article of a paper? I guess probably not. Although I guess in print would have been a lot more prevalent then. I guess maybe if they were a big enough family, they maybe would have had some kind of coverage or something.
Well, the story about Jesse Wall being shipped to Warrensburg after his suicide was actually covered in a Kansas City newspaper in 1896. And I thought, man, that's a really messed up story. Because it says the tragic end of the young man shocked the citizens of this community, and the letter which young Wall wrote prior to committing the act was to his cousin, Miss Leona Corder. It was simply a review leading up to the mad act of self-destruction caused by conditions which neither could overcome. The letter left no doubt as to premeditation upon the part of Wall to take his life, and it contained a few requests about, as to his burial, and that all of his property would go to her. And so the story about her getting married was actually in the newspaper in 1898. So Wall had been dead since 1896. And so in 1898, they're like, oh, Leona Corder's getting married. And she seems really upset about it. So we need to find out why. Oh, right. Because she wanted to marry her cousin, and then her parents said no, and then he killed himself. So let's dig up that story and rehash it as we talk about, her wedding to this other guy.
It's truly a soap opera.
It really is. And this is real life. Like this.
Yeah.
It just, sometimes I find these stories and I post them on my Facebook page, and I think, my God, people are going to think I'm making this up. and I wish I had an imagination that good. I really do, because some of this stuff's just off the wall crazy.
Well, it makes you wonder what people are going to say about us in 200 years.
Exactly.
And all of our stories.
Right. Exactly. Well, the nice thing is that our newspapers aren't nearly as graphic as they were back in the 1800s, early 1900s. The newspapers back then were just, I have what I call Morbid Monday, because I have to give myself one day to post something really, really disgusting. And only make it for that one day. Otherwise, I would do it, every day, because these stories are just so fascinating to me. But I have people that are like, they actually, I tell people that Morbid Monday is the day when I get the most likes on the page, and I lose the most people, because if people like the page midweek and they're like, oh, this is great history about this date, and what a cute page. What a cute page. And then Monday comes, and first thing, like 8:30 in the morning, they're like, this man was hit by a train. He was decapitated. His eyeballs were hanging out, and there was blood and guts everywhere. And they're like, oh my God. And then they unlike my page.
Unlike.
Right.
That's
So,
funny.
You either love it or you hate it. I have people that follow my page just because of Morbid Monday. So
That does not
pretty
surprise
funny.
me at all.
It's all true. It is all a part of Missouri's history, and it's absolutely fascinating. And it's probably why we have a lot of ghost stories too. So,
I bet.
it's pretty crazy as well.
So, Ginger, tell us, I think you've got some cool things coming up and some places you're going to go. And tell us how, and on social media, which we've already kind of talked about, how people can find you and why they want to hook up with Missouri History and Hauntings.
Well, I can tell you that I can be found on Facebook. Just do a search for Missouri History and Hauntings, and you'll find my Facebook page, and I post on it every single day, at least once, sometimes more than that if I have some stuff going on. And that's probably the best place to keep track of events I'll be hosting, events I'll be attending, and other things that are happening around the state. I encourage visitors bureaus and anybody involved in paranormal events or historical events to send me links so I can promote them as well on my Facebook page. Some of the things that I'll be doing in the next few months, I'm kind of taking a breather right now through the winter. I don't really want to plan anything too big in case we don't really know at this point what the weather's going to do, and I'd hate to get snowed out somewhere.
True.
But I am in the process of working on kind of a secret project. I've been wanting to write, and I've written things on and off for quite a few years now. But the one thing I'm really focused on is putting together this book project over the winter months, and hopefully by mid-late spring have it available. And it'll be pretty much similar to what you can find on the Facebook page. A lot of old, weird Missouri history straight from the newspapers that wrote them. Everything from the mid to late 1800s, early 1900s, really crazy stuff. Covering a lot of the stories we talked about tonight with spiritualism, which is ghosts, history, morbid stories, that sort of thing. So it's really fun. Best place to keep in contact and read some really crazy stuff that you probably didn't know about our state. Some of the things that I've got going on, though, in the next couple months is I'll be speaking at a Paranormal Unity event in Auburn, Illinois. Right, again. I wish it was in Missouri. But it'll be a lot of fun. It's in Auburn, Illinois, at the Haunted Hour Theater, which is owned by my friend Robin Terry. And every year he hosts this Paranormal Unity Day, where he gathers a variety of speakers to talk about different things paranormal history related. Of course, I'm going to be the resident history nerd for the day. And I'll be talking about how paranormal investigators can connect their paranormal findings with the history of a location and how to do that history research on a very basic level. Because I know it's starting to become a thing that more paranormal investigators are utilizing is deed records and plat maps and things like that, trying to research what happened in this location's history that would cause a haunting.
Yeah, that's good to hear that they're doing that.
Yeah, I'm starting to see it come up more and more, which makes me very happy. It makes the history nerd part of me very, very happy. And so I'll be there talking about that. I'll be trying to cram all of my information in a 45-minute presentation. Good luck with that, right? So there will be other speakers there as well, talking about a variety of different paranormal-themed topics. So that is taking place at the end of January. I'm actually going to pull my calendar up right now. It's January 31st. And you can find out more about that on my page, or you can do a search for the Haunted Hour Theater on Facebook, and they've got things about it on there as well. So I've got that coming up. I have a lot of plans to do some overnight and weekend events from St. Louis to St. Joseph. I've gone to St. Joseph on several occasions, and the people there are just so very nice that I can't stay away. And I am anxious for spring to get here so that I can go back and visit these people again. Some really great locations located, a lot of history in St. Joseph. And I've got a few places in between as well that I'm talking with to get some things set up. And we'll be doing some classes and overnights and weekend events. And it's going to be a lot of fun. I wish it was spring right now. I'm ready for winter to be over because I want to get out there and start doing things again.
Well, if you ever make a stop in Lexington, you'll have to let me know because that's where I'm from.
I will. You know what? I think I was just reading something about Lexington just today. Yeah. And now I don't remember what it was, but I know that I was just saw something.
There are some stories
about Lexington. Yeah, really, really great area.
Mm-hmm.
I will definitely do that. I will definitely keep you in mind for that. I try to find people who know areas of the state better than I do because I haven't been everywhere. You know, it's hard to know all the details about different places around the state, and so I try to find somebody that knows it on a personal level. You know, that I can see it through their eyes, really. And so absolutely.
Well, I would definitely like to for sure follow you to some nerdly event at some point so we bump into each other again. And you'll have to definitely keep us posted on this exciting project that you're doing. And if when that comes out, come back and talk to us again about that.
I would love to do it. I would absolutely love to. And I do send out a newsletter from time to time as well that usually includes some old history and, you know, what I've got going on.
Is that the newsletter link that's on your website? So that's a good place to click?
Absolutely. Yeah, you can go to my website at www.mohistoryhauntings.com, and I have a link on there that goes to my newsletter. And I try to send it out every month, and I think my last newsletter was in October, and I said, I'm going to have some dates for everyone in the newsletter in November, and then I realized that it's December now, and I did not send out newsletters. So
oops.
I'm not real good at that. but you know, I'm always accessible on Facebook. And if you want a more personal peek into my weird happenings, I'm on Instagram as well, at History Hauntings. And I post a lot of, you know, cemetery stuff. I'm kind of a taphophile, kind of. I drive a hearse. Who am I kidding? I love cemeteries. But, you know, I post stuff like that on Instagram and, you know, just weird stuff that happens during my day working from home. It's exciting stuff. If you can't find me any of those places, then, you know, you're not looking hard enough, I guess.
Well, you rock. Thank you so much for being with us today. And I'm sure people will look you up and follow you and for sure try to catch a picture of your hearse at some point in time.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, you know, anybody who has questions, just wants to tell me a good story, contact me through, you know, any of those social media accounts, through the website. I'm pretty much at my computer all of the time. And would love to hear from everyone.
Awesome. Well, thank you, ma'am, for being with us.
Thank you.
You're listening to the Big Séance podcast with Patrick Keller. Look for us on iTunes and be sure to check out bigseance.com for more discussion.
Before I leave you today, I wanted to give a quick shout out and thank you to Diane, whose Twitter handle is @paralogistics, and I'll let you figure out how to spell that. Diane is always mentioning and retweeting everything Big Séance, and I really appreciate it. Thank you, Diane. And also my buddy Randall Keller from the Voices podcast. He's always doing the same thing. Thank you. If you like the podcasts, please consider giving us a share on Facebook, a pin on Pinterest, a tweet on Twitter, or you can now find me on Google+. You just have to search for me, Patrick Keller. And you can now find that link on bigseance.com as well. Please bear with me in the coming weeks. With the holidays, I'm not sure yet exactly when the next episode will be coming, but there will be another one soon enough. So thank you in advance for your patience, and we'll eventually get into kind of a normal posting routine. I so look forward to starting a brand new year. And here's a little hint at what is to come here on the Big Séance podcast. I predict that we'll be hearing from quite a few psychics very soon. Thanks for listening. See you next time. For show notes, including links to anything we may have mentioned in this episode, visit bigseance.com, now the home of both the blog and the podcast. Just click on the Big Séance podcast logo or find it in the menu. You can also find and subscribe to the show on iTunes and Stitcher. Do you have any comments or feedback? Please contact me at patrick@bigseance.com. You can call my feedback line at 7755-TELL-ME. That's 775-583-5563. You can also record audio feedback right from the site using the SpeakPipe link included in the show notes. I could decide to include your voice in a future show. Thank you so much for listening and reading. Unfortunately, it's time to blow the candles out, but we'll see you and light them again next time.